In my wrestling and in my doubts, in my failures, you won't walk out. Your great love will lead me through. You are the peace in my troubled seas. Oh, you are the peace in my troubled seas. In the silence, you won't let go. In the questions, your truth will hold. Your great love will lead me through. You are the peace in my troubled seas. Oh, you are the peace in my troubled seas. My lighthouse, my lighthouse, my lighthouse, shining in the darkness, I will follow you. My lighthouse, I will trust the promise, and you will carry me safe to shore. Safe to shore. Safe to shore. Safe to shore. I won't fear what tomorrow brings. With each morning our eyes will sing. My God's love will lead me through. You are the peace in my troubled sea. Oh, you are the peace in my troubled seas. Oh, you're my lighthouse, my lighthouse, shining in the darkness, I will follow you. Oh, my lighthouse, I will trust the promise, and you will carry me safe to shore. Safe to shore. Safe to shore. Safe to shore. Fire before us.
Fire before us, you're the brightest. You will lead us through the storm.
Fire before us, you're the brightest. You will lead us through the storm. Fire before us, you're the brightest. You will lead us through the storm. Fire before us, you're the brightest. You will lead us through the storm. My lighthouse, shining in the darkness, I will follow you. My lighthouse, I will trust the promise, and you will carry me safe to shore. Safe to shore. Safe to shore. Safe to shore.
What's up, Rezlife students? It's Blake from Resurrection West, and we are continuing our series on the miracles and parables of Jesus. Last week, we heard about the miracle of Jesus turning water into wine at a wedding. And now we're talking about a parable. A parable is a simple story that's intended to have a meaning or a message behind it. And the reason why Jesus used a lot of parables during his time was because people didn't always understand what Jesus was saying. So parables were used to provide examples to the words that he was saying. You know that phrase, love your neighbor? I'm sure you've heard it before. Well, some people didn't quite understand what that meant when Jesus said it. So Jesus told a parable of a Good Samaritan, an extended story of what it looks like to actually love your neighbor. So parables, they have truth and they have messages for us to receive in our own life. to add meaning to the words that Jesus gave. And today we're reading a parable. This parable is about the kingdom of heaven. That's a phrase you may or may not have heard before. The kingdom of heaven is a way of describing how God desired the world to be. You know how you have ever dreamed of having a perfect world? I have. My perfect world is me living in a house overlooking the mountains with a golden retriever by my side. However, that doesn't exist, maybe someday. But God had a vision and a path for how the world would look. But before sin entered the world. And since sin entered, God sent Jesus to remind humans how God intended the world to look, to redeem it. But like I said, when Jesus was describing how God desired the world to be, people didn't get it. So he used parables to explain it more. So hear these words from Matthew 13, 31 through 33. The kingdom of heaven is like a mustard seed that someone took and planted in his field. It's the smallest of all the seeds. But when it's grown, it's the largest of all vegetable plants. It becomes a tree so that the birds in the sky come and nest in its branches. He told them another parable. The kingdom of heaven is like yeast, which a woman took and hid in a bushel of wheat flour until the yeast had worked its way through all the dough. Again, that's from Matthew 13, 31 through 33. So why is Jesus talking about mustard seeds and yeast? I don't know if you cook with mustard seeds, I typically don't, but this is a picture of what a mustard seed looks like. It's incredibly small. You can barely even tell it's anything, especially next to that penny. And then here is a picture of yeast. But it's not just yeast like you get in a package at the store. That's not necessarily what this passage is talking about. Some bread requires a starter, which is kind of like yeast, but a little more substance. We typically use it for making sourdough bread. So here are two things that Jesus is making a big deal of. They're pretty normal, and they're pretty small things. And we hear about the impact that both of these things have, their potential once they are in their true form. So what this passage is saying is that even though things might appear small, they can have a really big impact. And anything small can have a big impact if you really think about it. When Jesus was doing his ministry here on earth, he was doing a lot of what appears to be small acts with people. Healing this person, or doing this miracle, or having that conversation. They were small moments with people. Granted, there were a lot of big moments too, like feeding the 5,000. But in all those small moments, we learn about the large impact they were having on the people and the world around them. And what Jesus is saying in this parable is that even when things might seem small, they have the potential to become something big. And as followers of Jesus, one of the callings on our life is to embrace these small moments and foster the growth that might be possible within them. So mustard seeds and yeast, they're also always the start of something. So if the kingdom of heaven is like a mustard seed or yeast, and the kingdom of heaven is made up of small moments that have a big impact. The kingdom of heaven requires starting moments to take shape and form into something new. I think often about the small moments in my life that have become something big, but also about the moments in my life that could have been big, but I really didn't allow them to take shape. I think about the Rezlife Serve Day we had on April 17th this past year. On that day, Rezlife students were assigned different projects around the Kansas City area, and we were all doing our individual thing really, really well. But even if it didn't seem like it, over 100 of us were working together around the Kansas City area doing something big. We were serving those in our community. And maybe that felt like a small moment to you, but it was actually having a big impact on those around us. We were serving our community, and that is what God intended the world to look like. But I also think of those moments, maybe in my life, that seemed small, that could have had a big impact, but I didn't quite take advantage of them. I think of conversations with people at school that I chose to ignore, or chose to kind of place my agenda first over others. I think of people that needed help, whether on the street or in the store, that kind of maybe came up to me, but I thought of a reason to say no to them or why I couldn't help them in that moment. I'm sure a lot of us can think of those moments in our life. Small moments we saw that could have been something big, but we chose to say no instead. And if the kingdom of God is made up of small moments that have a big impact, then we have to recognize those small moments and allow them to have a big impact. The big moments will only happen when we allow ourselves to trust God in that moment. And students, I challenge you this week, look for the small things happening in your life and around you and allow them to take shape. Don't just say no, but say yes into what could come from those things. Allow them to grow into something big. And when we allow that to happen, then the world is able to see Jesus better and how God intended the world to look. So let's embrace that challenge this week and allow the small things to be made into something big so that the kingdom of God can look more and more like Jesus and how God designed it to be.